Growing up with famous parents means living a privileged life, but of course there are still rules to follow. We'll give you some info about the parenting philosophies of Jada and Will Smith, and let you know which rules their children are forced to follow. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed to The Taco for more videos. Let's get started. Freedom of expression. It's no secret that Willow and Jaden Smith are free-spirited to say the least. During an interview with Vanity Fair, Will Smith claims that he and his wife have always encouraged their kids to express themselves. He joked that they may have gone too far, but notes that he has two very fearless children. Will Smith admits that it can be very scary to let your children do what they want on their own, but he's proud of how they've turned out. As a result of being encouraged to be themselves, both kids, especially Jaden, aren't concerned with what other people think of them. Jaden even made waves once when he modeled women's wear for a Louis Vuitton campaign. Different rules. Having the same rules for all of your children sounds good and fair in theory, but Will and Jada Smith find it's extremely difficult to actually enforce. Their son Jaden gets more freedom, and not just because he's older than his sister Willow. He's known to travel around with many friends, something that Will calls his small army. This makes his parents worry about him much less compared to his sister, who is more likely to be flying solo. Although they try to enact the same rules for both kids, both parents admit that it's challenging. Will Smith claims it's a different world for a girl. Punishments. They might have grown up with less rules than most children, there are still consequences when they're broken. While their peers might have been spanked or grounded, Will Smith doesn't believe in traditional forms of punishment and discipline. To him, the most important part of addressing your child's mistakes is making sure that they've learned from them. They want their kids to be responsible for their own lives. If the kids make a decision that he and Jada disagree with, they need to explain to their parents their reasons and motivation for what they have done. Circle of safety. It can be easy to see your parents as your enemies, even if you know that they have your best interests at heart. But Will and Jada wanted to make sure Jaden and Willow always feel safe coming to them when they have a problem. When their kids were young, they created something they call the circle of safety. Basically, this is a time when the kids can confess anything to their parents, even things they might not approve of. During the circle of safety, the kids are free from consequences and judgments if they're honest. But if the issues are discovered outside of the circle, that's a whole different story. Be themselves. It can be a difficult thing to balance the way you envision your children's lives should be and how they actually are. It can be tempting to push your kids into activities that you want them to do, but Will and Jada try very hard not to. Instead, they encourage their kids to pursue what they're interested in and excel at. They believe that it teaches their kids to embrace their strengths instead of focusing on what skills they might be lacking. Will Smith claims that he saw many parents trying to impose their wills on their children when he was growing up, and he desperately wanted to avoid that with his own kids. Fashion. The only rule about fashion in the Smith household is that there are no rules. Whether Willow wants to chop all her hair off or Jaden decides to model women's clothing, it's all totally fine. Of course, this freedom of personal expression definitely fits into all of Will and Jada's parenting philosophies, but there is another reason why they have given up trying to enforce any sort of fashion rules on their children. Apparently, after some scathing reviews of their outfits, Jada and Willow gave Will Smith a taste of his own medicine. They presented some old photos of his previous outfits, including a photo of him wearing a crop top. After that, Will decided to drop the subject. Negotiations. We said earlier that Will and Jada don't believe in traditional punishments for their kids. They believe that any form of discipline should fit the crime, so they allow their children to have a voice in the matter. After being explicitly told not to, Willow signed up for a social media website. Jada's response was to ask Willow what she felt was a fair punishment for her actions. The two agreed on a month of revoked computer privileges, which both thought was a fair repercussion. Divide and conquer. Will and Jada occasionally find that it's best to divide up responsibilities for their children. In fact, sometimes Will struggles when Willow overshares in the circle of truth. When Jimmy Fallon asked Jada for advice on parenting a girl, she responded that he should make sure to never try to pry information from his daughter. She believes that the father's role should not be to question his daughter. If Willow needs something, she knows she can come to her mother about it. She believes that mothers and daughters can understand each other best, and fathers should take the backseat in that department. Partnership. Although this parenting philosophy has raised more than a few eyebrows, Will and Jada Smith firmly believe in treating their children as partners. Just as you wouldn't tell a fellow adult to clean their own bedroom, Will and Jada don't tell their kids to either. Instead, they remind them that their parents actually own their rooms, so there are certain standards they are expected to follow until they are out on their own. They believe in treating their children like adults and describe their relationship as a partnership rather than a dictatorship. Will and Jada never want their children to feel like extensions of their parents parents, but rather their own autonomous people. Listen first. Since parents are older and presumably wiser, it can be difficult not to tell your children what they should do in a certain situation. Will and Jada don't believe in presenting their own opinions on a matter until their kids have had a chance to talk first. That way, they make sure that they aren't steamrolling their kids into making decisions that they're not happy with. Jada proudly describes herself as a non-traditional parent who would never want to project her own issues or ideas onto her son and daughter. Plus, they believe it's important to let their kids make their own mistakes so they can learn from them. What do you think of Will and Jada's unorthodox parenting philosophies? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Bye for now.